The Cult of Bacchus, Dionysian Mysteries. Imagine a midnight ceremony, masked figures, wild wine spilling, and a god called Bacchus at the center. That's the Dionysian, or Bacchic cult. Ancient, ecstatic rites, imported from Greece, and loved by many Romans, especially women and lower classes. By 1860 BCE, the Roman Senate panicked, citing secret meetings, alleged murders, political conspiracies, and immoral behavior. They passed the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, a legal ban that forbade Bacchic gatherings across Italy unless approved by Rome. Senators ordered nations, arrested leaders, and crushed unsanctioned rites. The message was clear. Private religion that threatened public order would not be tolerated. Result, public Bacchic worship was suppressed, rituals driven underground or adapted into safer, state-approved forms. The ban strengthened state control over religion and set a lasting precedent. When belief looks like a political threat, governments step in. Takeaway: the Bacchanalia story isn't just ancient gossip. It's an early example of how power, fear, and law can reshape faiths overnight. Paganism under Christianity and Islam. Hook: how whole paganism under Christianity and Islam. Picture a city square once filled with bronze gods, incense smoke, and crowds for seasonal rites. Then imagine those statues toppled and temples locked shut. That sweeping change is what happened when empires converted. In 380 CE, the Roman Empire made Christianity the state religion. Pagan cults lost legal protection almost overnight. Temples were closed or repurposed. Public festivals tied to civic life disappeared, and civic priests lost their roles. Centuries later, from the 7th century on, Islamic conquests reshaped religious law across North Africa and the Middle East. Some local practices were absorbed, many public pagan rites were outlawed, and temple lands were redistributed. This wasn't total erasure. Folk customs, seasonal festivals, and local rituals often survived in new forms. Saints replaced gods, harvest rites became church feasts, and archaeologists still unearth altars and votive offerings. But politically and publicly, the face of religion changed fast. Plazas once dedicated to many gods became dominated by one creed. Takeaway: political conversion, legal power, and social pressure can erase public.
Manichaeism, the lost global faith. Picture a faith born in the 3rd century that claimed a cosmic fight between light and dark, and then rode trade routes from Persia to Roman Egypt and all the way to China. That was Manichaeism, founded by Mani, who wove together Zoroastrian, Christian, and Buddhist ideas into a tight, dualistic message: salvation through knowledge and moral purity. At its height, Manichaean communities and missionaries spanned 3 continents. Merchant caravans and Nile ports carried its texts and icons. But success bred enemies. Sassanid rulers saw a political threat, Christian leaders branded it heresy, and local authorities from North Africa to Central Asia began arresting leaders and burning books. By framing the faith as a rival ideology, states justified violent suppression and legal bans. Archaeology still proves it existed. Fragile Manichaean codices found in Turfan and Egyptian deserts show sophisticated scripture and art. But by the 2nd millennium, the movement had mostly vanished, not because its ideas died, but because power crushed its institutions. Takeaway: Manichaeism shows how a belief can grow across continents, and how law, politics, and doctrine can erase whole religious networks while leaving traces that reshape later faiths.
Tengrism, the steppe sky religion. Imagine the open steppe, endless sky, horses thundering, a smoke-wreathed fire where leaders ask the sky god Tengri for victory. That image is Tengrism, a shamanic, sky-centered belief system practiced by Turkic and Mongolic nomads for over 1,000 years. Tengrism gave political legitimacy to early states. The Gukturks and later the Mongol Empire used Tengri's blessing to crown khans. It was practical and local. Ritual shamans, animal sacrifice, ancestor veneration, and a deep ethic tied to mobility and the herd. Why did it disappear? 2 big forces: religion and ideology. From about the 9th to 15th centuries, many steppe peoples converted to Islam or Buddhism, faiths brought by merchants, Sufi missionaries, and settled states. Then, in the 20th century,
Soviet atheism outlawed public worship, closed ritual sites, and pushed forced secularization. Outcome? The institutional practice faded, but Tengrist ideas survived in language, customs, and royal myths. Today, you can still find Tengrist symbols in folk songs, state ceremonies, and recent cultural revivals across Central Asia, a reminder that beliefs can be suppressed but not entirely erased. Takeaway? Tengrism shaped empires under the open sky, and it's
The Knights Templar, from holy order to heresy. Imagine white mantles with a red cross riding out from fortress commanderies across Europe. That was the Knights Templar. Founded around 1119 after the First Crusade to protect pilgrims, they quickly became more than monks with swords, an international network of commanderies, land, and loans. In short, an early proto-bank that financed kings and crusades. For almost 2 centuries, the Templars grew rich and powerful, visible and resented. That visibility became their danger. By October 13, 1307, King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt to the order, ordered don arrests across his realm, accusing Templars of heresy, idolatry, and obscene rites. Under torture, many confessed. Political pressure on Pope Clement V followed. After years of trials, the order was officially dissolved in 1312, and the last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was executed in 1314. Their property was seized or absorbed. The order as an institution vanished.
Catharism, the Pure Ones, and the Albigensian Crusade. Imagine a peaceful hilltop community in southern France where people reject worldly wealth and preach spiritual purity. That was Catharism, called the Pure Ones. Emerging in the 12th century, Cathars taught a sharp division between a good spiritual God and an evil material world. Their fast-growing communities across Languedoc alarmed both local lords and the Roman Church. Why the reaction? Cathar belief undercut church authority and social order, and tensions escalated into politics. In 1209, Pope Innocent III launched the Albigensian Crusade. Northern French nobles, led by Simon de Montfort, marched south. Towns were sacked, whole communities punished, and resistance was crushed over decades. The famous siege of Montségur ended in 1244, when roughly 200 defenders were executed, a final brutal symbol of the movement's end. Outcome: Cathar institutions were dismantled, the medieval Inquisition spread into the region, and Languedoc's culture and autonomy were dramatically reduced. Long-term impact? The Crusade tightened church-state power and created legal tools for suppressing dissent, a turning point where religious difference became a matter of imperial security. Takeaway: the Serra religion, colonial and religious suppression. Picture a riverbank ceremony, drums, sacred salt, elders calling ancestors by name. That's Serra religion, an ancient West African system centered on ancestor worship, creation stories, sacred groves, and specialist priests who kept law, medicine, and ritual. For centuries, the Serra shaped local kingship, land rights, and community life across today's Senegal and Gambia. Then came 2 pressures. First, gradual Islamization from the 11th century on pushed some communities toward Islam. Second, the 19th, 20th century French colonial era and missionary campaigns treated indigenous rights as backward. Mission schools, new laws, and Christian missions broke social authority. Sacred sites were fenced off, ritual leaders lost status, and public ceremonies were discouraged or penalized. Families were forced into new legal systems. Lands tied to ritual use were redistributed. The outcome? Public Serra practice shrank. Many traditions went quiet or blended with Islam and Christianity, and knowledge moved into hidden lineages. But the religion didn't vanish. Its language, proverbs, funeral rites, and agricultural calendar survive in folklife. Today, cultural associations and scholars work to revive groves, oral histories, and rites once suppressed. Takeaway: the Serra story shows how colonial law and missionary power can erase public practice, but also how deep-rooted culture keeps returning, often transformed but still alive.
The ghost dance movement, indigenous spiritual revival. Picture people dancing under the stars, calling back the buffalo and the dead. That was the ghost dance, a pan-native spiritual revival in the late 1880s that promised healing and a return of the old world. It began with the Paiute prophet Vovoka and spread fast across the plains and Great Basin. Tens of thousands took part, desperate after disease, dispossession, and starvation. Why worry the U.S. government? The movement's speed and unity looked political. Settlers and officials feared uprisings. In December 1890, at Wounded Knee Creek, an army attempt to disarm a Lakota group erupted. In the chaos that followed, roughly 300 Lakota, many women and children, were killed, and dozens of soldiers too. Outcome? The ghost dance was suppressed, leaders arrested, and federal policy hardened into forced assimilation and reservation control. Long-term impact? The massacre erased a generation, but the ghost dance's memory kept resistance alive, a reminder that spiritual movements can become flashpoints when peoples facing injustice gather hope into collective action. Takeaway: the ghost dance shows how faith, fear, and power collide, and how cultural survival often outlasts brutal attempts to erase it.
Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, messianic revolt in China. Listen, between 1850 and 1864, a man named Hong Zhuquan claimed he was the younger brother of Jesus and built a millennial Christian state in southern China. Poor harvests, famine, corruption, and the humiliation after the Opium Wars made millions desperate. Hong turned that grief into a powerful movement. The Taiping captured Nanjing in 1853, renamed it Tianjin, and at its peak, controlled large swaths of the Yangtze Valley. Their program was radical: communal land redistribution, women's rights, and the banning of foot binding and opium. Sounds progressive, but the rebellion was also brutal and highly centralized. Civil war, scorched towns, and sieges followed. Cost? Modern estimates put the death toll at 20 to 30 million, one of history's deadliest conflicts. The Qing suppressed Taiping with regional armies and foreign help, but the dynasty never fully recovered. Long-term, the Taiping War shattered the countryside, accelerated regional military power, forced limited reforms, and helped set the stage for China's revolutionary century. Takeaway: the Taiping shows how faith, inequality, and state failure can explode into catastrophe and reshape a nation for generations.
Heaven's Gate, modern destructive cult case study. Listen, this is Heaven's Gate in a breath. In the early 1970s, two outsiders, Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles, fused Christian imagery, sci-fi, and strict discipline into a secretive movement. They taught that Earth was a prison and that faithful followers could ascend to a higher existence by shedding their human ties and obeying complete control. Why it mattered? They mixed charismatic leadership, isolation, and a clear end-of-world promise, a lethal combination. Over decades, they recruited dozens, enforced celibacy, uniformity, and a total break from family and money. The turning point came in March 1997 at a rented home near San Diego. 39 members died together in a planned mass death. The method was clinical, rehearsed. The result, a shocking public finale to a private world. Outcomes and impact? The deaths sparked global debate on cult coercion, mental control, and how to spot dangerous movements. Today, Heaven's Gate is a grim case study taught in psychology, law, and media ethics. A reminder that belief plus isolation and absolute authority can become deadly.
Falun Gong, banned in modern China. Listen, this is Falun Gong in one tight breath. Founded by Li Hongzhi in 1992, Falun Gong mixed slow Qigong exercises with moral teachings about truth, compassion, and forbearance. By the late 1990s, tens of millions across China were practicing. Doctors, office workers, retirees, drawn by health gains and simple ethics. Why it collided with power? Beijing saw a mass social movement outside party control. In April 1999, tens of thousands of practitioners staged a calm sit-in near government offices to demand the right to practice. The state answered with alarm. By July 1999, the Communist Party declared Falun Gong an evil cult, launched a nationwide ban, a propaganda campaign, mass arrests, mandatory re-education, and tight censorship. Main events and outcomes? Millions were stripped of public roles, detained in labor camps or prisons, and thousands fled abroad. The movement reorganized overseas, media outlets, legal teams, and advocacy groups, turning the issue into a global human rights cause and a constant thorn in China's foreign image. Long-term impact? Falun Gong forced Beijing to sharpen surveillance, expand internet controls, and justify sweeping security.
State Shinto dismantled after World War II. State Shinto began in the Meiji era as a political project, the emperor framed as a living symbol. National rituals taught loyalty, and local shrines were woven into school and civic life. By the 1930s and 40s, the system helped mobilize millions for war. Ritual, education, and bureaucracy fused religion to the state. Why it was dismantled? After Japan's defeat, the Allied occupation saw state Shinto as a driver of militarism. In 1945 to 46, the U.S. and Japanese reformers pushed two decisive blows: the Emperor's 1946 Humanity Declaration, renouncing divine status, and the occupation's Shinto Directive, which forbade government sponsorship of shrine activities and forced separation of religion and state. Main events and outcomes: state funding and mandatory shrine rites ended. Tens of thousands of local shrines continued as private religious institutions, but public schools and officials could no longer promote them. The 1947 Constitution then enshrined religious freedom and separation of church and state. Long-term impact: Japan moved from a state religion to a secular legal order. That break reduced state-driven nationalism, reshaped civic life, and still surfaces today in debates over war memory and shrines like Yasukuni. Bottom line, when a state faith fuels policy, removing its power can be a swift, lasting tool for political reset.
If history's forbidden stories intrigue you, like, share, and subscribe. And let the nightly historian keep uncovering the truths others tried to erase.